All right, how about a little caliper rebuild today? These are Bendix calipers. They're rear calipers of Esprits from the very early 80s through early 88. The Bosch cars had them, but once they switched over to the Delco, I think they went to outboard brakes, and they were no longer using these. But anyway, we're gonna go through the rebuild process of this, and we're gonna take our calipers from this to looking like this, rebuilt, looking good and ready to go back on the car. So what I've done is I've taken the caliper off the car and taken the brake pads out. And from here, I want to show you how to disassemble the unit completely, 100%, and then inspect the parts, reassemble everything the right way, and point out a few pitfalls that people make when disassembling that can really damage these calipers if you're not careful. You have to do it a certain way, otherwise you're going to ruin some of the internal parts, especially in the emergency brake cable section here. So let's just roll with it. Let's get into it. All right, so you've got it off the car. You've taken the pads out. Of course, I've got the bleeder out. I've got the brake line out. All right, so now we get into the meat of it. What we want to do first is remove this mounting bracket from the core caliper itself. So to do that, there's two sliding metal wedges that come in on both sides of the mounting bracket. And usually there's some type of pin. There's some little holes here. And usually you've got a pin that you just need to remove to release these so you can slide them out. So I've taken these pins out. It's a pretty easy process. You don't need a lot of tools for this. All right, I'm going to knock these out. And I want to knock them from the front of the mounting bracket back toward the piston. They only go one way because there's a tab on the other side that prevents it from going too far. So I'm just going to come over here. Here's that little wedge, retaining wedge. And all I did was put a punch on the face of it there and knock it back toward the piston side of the caliper. Once you get one out, the mounting bracket will become loose. And you can really, at that point, just slide it right off and the other side falls out. So I'm going to set those aside. Here's our caliper. I'm going to set that aside and just finish the disassembly of this. What I want to do is remove these two retaining, what do you call these things? They're not brackets. Well, I'm going to call them brackets. These two retaining brackets. So I just need a little screwdriver for that. And back here in the caliper, there's in the mounting bracket of the caliper, there's some holes, and you just got to pop them out of their hole. They kind of like to stay where they are. Once you get both out, you just pull it out by hand. And these are what I'm talking about. These two little ears here go into receiving holes inside the bracket. So you want to get those out of their holes and just pull it out. All right, so we got that out. We'll do the other one. And there's the other one. And there's the mounting bracket. So this is disassembled. Now it's ready to be stripped, cleaned up, and we'll get that ready for the rebuild. Same with these parts. So I'm going to set them aside. I'll put them over here on the bench. Now we'll go to the caliper. All right. From this point, the first thing you want to do is remove the piston. To do that, you cannot, a lot of calipers, the go-to way is to get an air hose, put it in, and crank it with air, and it'll push the piston out. It will do that, but you'll ruin some parts. These pistons have been designed such that they actually screw in all the way. The earlier ones, there was like a 15-degree turn you had to make, and then you could apply air and it would come out. These calipers, and the way you can distinguish, the early calipers on the S1 and S2, the emergency brake mechanism had 3 bolts that held that on the back. This has a rubber boot. If this is the caliper you have, the Bendix caliper, you cannot use compressed air. Not yet. We've got to unscrew this. So to do that, I've got an old Craftsman screwdriver. that has a square shaft, which is perfect. And it just happens to be almost the exact dimension of the slit inside the piston. So what I want to do is put it in here. I'm going to be turning counterclockwise. We'll see if I can do this. We might have to go to a vise. I don't know. Nope, she's turning. Now you're going to be improvising with tools here, and they're going to pop out as you try to turn, because it doesn't turn easily. It's pretty difficult to turn. But just hang in there, because you have to do this. You just got to find a way to turn this piston out. We'll get there. We'll get there. It's easier if you put it in a vise, but I'm trying to do it so you can see me. So we're not going to use a vise. Okay. Yeah, I got a good grip on that one. It might be close to being all the way out. You're going to keep doing this until you see that the piston's not coming out of the board anymore. And then that's when we can move on to the next step. So let me see. Okay, I think that's not coming out anymore. So it's about that far out, and it's disengaged with the mechanism inside of the piston housing. So what I want to do now is just remove the boot. Take that off, set it aside. I'm going to try one more turn just to make sure, because I don't want to damage it. Yep, okay, disengaged. All right, from here, we got to get the piston out. And I've drained the brake fluid, but there's probably still some in there sitting in the piston. To get the piston out, at this point, I can use compressed air. But it's going, be careful, because it pops out like a bullet out of a gun. And if there's brake fluid in there, it's going to go everywhere. You're going to get covered. So take precautions. What I'm going to do is get a rag. I need to plug up one of the two holes. So I'm going to use a bleeder screw and just screw it in. Now you do not want to get your fingers in here when you do this, because it'll crush your finger. So I'm going to cover this to keep any, actually I'm going to turn it over. It's probably safer this way. That way you can't come jumping out. Cover that, get my airline. And what I'm going to do is just put air into where the brake line was attached. All right, that popped. That was the piston coming out. Hitting the back of the bracket here. So there's your piston. All right, that came out. And we're left with this mechanism. So now, and we're going to take this all apart. We're going to go through that. But now we want to get this disassembled back here. I'm just going to take this bleeder screw out and put it in there temporarily. Set that aside. All right. Now, if your calipers have never been rebuilt before, you've got the original Bendix boot. It has a little extra sleeve that goes around the emergency brake arm. It's very difficult to try to get the boot off over the arm that way. So we're not going to do that. I'll show you what we'll do instead. Because if your boot's in good condition, you can reuse it. See, I got it popped off. Now, if I try to get this boot off and kind of work it over this arm, I probably could, but I risk ripping that rubber. So I'm just going to leave it like this, because when I pull this arm out, I'm going to retract it. And once I do that, this boot will just slide off that shaft. Okay, so you got this far, and now we're looking at the inner workings of the emergency brake cable. And what we need to do next, there's a little retaining pin here, like a C-clip, And we want to remove that so we can extract the emergency brake cable. Okay? And it's just a little C-clip like this. So we'll set that there. And now we're ready to take this arm out. Now, I could go to the press and use the press to get it out, but then I'd have to move the camera, and I don't want to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to knock it out now. That's okay. I can do that. When I go to reinstall it, I won't be able to use the same method. I have to use a press. But for now, I'm just going to knock this out. So I'm going to take a punch and see if I can get this to move a little bit. All right, it's going. It's like halfway. I'll keep going. So the boot came right off the arm. Ordinarily, I don't do it like this. I'm trying to work in front of the camera. Usually I'll use the vise and it'll be more manageable and more controlled. But so the boot sits on this, like here, like this. So like I said, if you take this boot and you just kind of roll it back and then you knock the pin out, then the boot slides right off. If you put the pin in and then you're trying to work the boot over this part of the arm, that's no good, no good. All right, so we'll set that aside. We've got this that came out, and there's a little cam tab that rolled under the bench here. Here it is. All right, so what came out? This little cam type device that's going to sit in here, and that helps when you hit the emergency brake. It pivots and it pushes down. That came out. This retainer came out, and the arm came out. So I got those three out. Okay, so the next step, now I can pull the rest of this mechanism out of the back of the caliper. There's nothing holding it in. It might be a little tight. There's a rubber bushing on the shaft of this pin that goes through, and but if you just tap it lightly on this side, it'll come back out. So let's try that. There we go. All right, so now I'm pulling this out just like that. And here are the threads I was talking about. So the piston threads on like that. So if you had used compressed air, the piston can't come out. It's impossible because it's on the threads and it's not going to spin itself out. It's just going to pull, pull, pull. And what happens is you end up pulling this out of the piston. So there's a retaining plate in here, and you'll bend this and you'll crack it and you'll yank this out of the piston. And there's also a bearing in here as well. You're going to ruin all that. So that's why I keep saying and stressing, don't use the compressed air until you unscrew this sucker all the way. It's very, very important. Okay, so we've got 5 washers on here, and I can pull them off. They're sort of all convex, almost like a cymbal on a drum set, right? And they work together as a spring. So when you put the two together, they actually outwork as a spring. It might be hard to see on the camera, but they're not flat washers. They're kind of concave. I couldn't really set it up on the press really well, so I've got it in a vise, and I'm just working back and forth from one side to the other with a punch and a hammer. All right, here are your two pieces. So we got them apart. Now this is just the bare casting of the piston housing, and then this is the bracket. And actually you can see right here, if you can see that, there's a little hole, and that's where the spring and the little dowel go into, which I drilled out. So when we put this back together again, we're going to drill a new hole. We're going to thread it, and we're going to tap it and put in a little retainer. So that's about it for. Oh, there's a seal in here that goes around the piston. We'll pop that out. Just a big like O-ring. There it is. That comes in the rebuild kit. And now this is pretty clean. I'm picking, there's a little washer in here that these springs sit on. It sits right in here. It's in there pretty good. Sometimes I clean it and then get it out. But I'm going to see if I can pop it out. Oh, there we go. Yeah, so it's just a flat, large washer looking thing. We'll put that there with the rest to clean up. And now we can clean this up, clean up all these parts, get everything looking good, and then we're going to reassemble. Oh, what I was going to mention, if you look in the manual on the disassembly and the overhaul of the rear calipers, you'll notice that Lotus recommends you use a tool to basically spread these apart, right? Because it's a press fit onto here that slides down, it's press fit. They want you to use a tool to spread these apart. So I've tried to manufacture that tool based on the images. I can't get these things to budge. I mean, it's cast iron, and to try to pry them apart is super hard. So that's why I went to the vise and with a punch, just working each side slowly, you know, it comes off. And when we put it back on, we are going to use the press, so I'll show you how I do that. But for now, we're disassembled, and we're going to clean everything up, and then we're going to reassemble and have some good-looking calipers. Actually, we have one more thing to do, and that is the piston. So inside the piston is a little retaining clip, and then there's a metal bracket, and behind that there's a little bearing, and then there's a screw mechanism back there. So let's take this apart, and I'll show you what that looks like. Just pulling this retaining pin out. Okay, there's that pin. Put that there. Now we're going to, there's a little bracket. We're going to pop this bracket out. It looks like this. Put that aside. And then now we're going to carefully take this out. And this piston is now empty. There's nothing in there. So what you've got here, these are little ball bearings. These allow this to turn as you engage the emergency brake. Makes it a little easier. And then here is a mechanism with a spring, return spring on it. And
when it's all together, this that I showed you earlier, that the caliper actually spins onto. Threads right into there. So when you thread that caliper on, what you're really doing is when you thread this piston on, what you're really doing is threading this onto that rod. So that's how much movement you get with a turn when you're turning that piston in and when you're trying to release it. So it moves quite a bit. All right, and then on here, I think I showed you that before, there's a little O-ring, we're going to replace that. Now, you remember in the beginning of the video, I said you don't want to hit this with compressed air if you don't turn the piston out. Let me show you what happens if you do. All right, here's that retaining plate. This one's good. We extracted the piston the correct way. If you do it the wrong way, here's that same plate. And you can see it's bent. It's no longer flat, and it has a bunch of stress cracks in it, and it's broken in half. If you try to pull the piston out with just air without unturning it first, you're going to ruin these parts. So just FYI, that's what happens, and you'll also mess up your bearings. And I don't know where you can buy just these bearings in a rebuild kit or from an online supplier. I have no idea how you would get this part. So yeah, bad things can happen if you don't do it the right way.
All right, we've got some clean parts. So now we get to start assembly. All right, we're going to start with the piston. So we've got this all cleaned up. When we reassemble this, there's a tiny little hole right there. I don't know if you can see that. And then you got a little pin on the bottom of this coil spring here sticking out, and that goes in the hole. So you get that in there. Set that there. Perfect. All right. Next thing that goes in is our little bearings, little ball bearings on here, and that's going to slide right over the top. I guess I can. I'm going to pull this out. All right. So this goes in first, and then the bearings go on top. Then the retaining plate goes on. And then the retaining clip goes on. So that's what I'm doing inside the piston. All right, so we put the spring in first. All right, we got the bearing going in. Good stuff. Retaining plate that we did not destroy because we unscrewed the piston, right? Unscrew the piston. Got to remember that. It's a big one. All right, we pop that on, so it's looking like that inside there now. Once we get that, we go to our retaining clip. Now, I'm not lubricating anything because when this goes in to the bore here, it's going to be saturated in brake fluid, so that provides the lubrication. All right, we got it in there. Good to go. So now if we take, that's going to screw in, screw out, doing what it should. It's perfect. So we'll set that aside. And now we want to pick up the housing for the brake piston caliper. And what we want to do, we're going to start on the emergency brake side. All right, starting on the e-brake side, first thing we want to do is put in this big washer with a hole in the middle. That drops right there. Okay, with that in, next we do this guy. So this guy goes in from the piston, goes in from the e-brake side. Oh, but before we do that, we got to put these springs on it. All right. So remember I told you these things are a little concave on one side? So you want to put that side, the first one goes that side down. So when pressure is applied to this washer can actually flatten out. If we put it the other way, we apply pressure, it doesn't have any ability to spring. So we want to make sure we put it in correctly. So I'm going to stack everything on here, and then I'm going to slide it in. Okay, so the other 4, you've got 5 of these in total. You take 2 and you put them together such that they can squeeze together, right? So there's about 1/8 of an inch between these 2 in the center. And then you take the next 2, same thing. You put them together so there's a big gap in the center of them in the middle. Take one set, you're going to slide it on. You got to go over the O-ring. So just be very careful going over that O-ring. Put on the next set, over that O-ring, over the O-ring. And then the last one, over the O-ring. Okay. Here I just want to use a little bit of brake fluid on that O-ring to give it a little lubrication. Let me do that. Perfect. All right, now we take this. If you look at those washers, you can see how they're separated, right? It's because they're kind of concave and convex on the other side. But that's the order I have them in. All right, with that, you take the casting and you're just going to slide this in. Rotate it a little, give it a push, and it'll come out that side. All right, so you've got that in. And at this point, you know, you can mess around. Now I put that piston in. Give it a little turn. You see how that's going in? Turn it out. You get to the point where you can release it, right? So that's what you're trying to do when you take these apart the first time. If it's in, I try to get that out. It's not coming out. There's no way that's coming out of there. So unscrew, unscrew, unscrew till you get it to like there, and then it'll come out. All right. Now, this is the trickiest part of putting it back together again, because what we want to do is we're going to put this in, a little retainer, and then you've got this little pivot camshaft that provides the motion needed when you put leverage on the emergency brake cable. This is going to provide the twist to push that caliper out. And then this is going to go through, and all this has to connect. Now, because these are springs, those washers are springs, I can't push this through. Remember how tight it was when I took it apart? So what I need to do is actually, I do this on the press. And I use a little socket. This is a 1/4 inch drive, 5.5 millimeter socket, so it's got a really small head. And I just place it on the end of that shaft that I pushed through that the piston screws onto. And then on the press, I can press this down and this will slide in very easily. So that's what I'm going to do next. All right, so I'm getting ready to take this to the press. I took it out again because I want to grease everything. This emergency brake side gets grease. And there's actually bushings in here for this pivot arm, right? So I want to make sure I get some grease in there as well. So I'm going to do that now. All right, so let's get over to the press and I'll show you how I put all this back together again. All right, just need to work the press down. All right, so when I put this socket on, what I'm doing is going right on the edge of that little shaft. Right on the edge. You don't need a whole lot of force, so it's pretty nice. I made contact. I'm going to push it down now. It's depressing nicely. I'm working on the left side of the car. Tab is facing me, so I'm going in on the left side. Now you got to hook the other side of this spring. Usually I have a screwdriver with me, but I don't. There we go. Okay. Now it's just a matter of aligning it up and getting it through that last little bit. Just like that. There it went in. Mechanism's working perfectly. Okay, so again, on the press, you can see how I can just barely get the end of that cam. That's all that shaft coming through. That's all I need to do is just to press that, and then I can slide this bar back through. So this is reassembled now. I'm just going to put some grease around here, and then we can put the cap back on it. All right, we're making progress. Two things to do now. We have to put this little retaining clip back on the end of this shaft so it doesn't work its way back out. We're going to put a little grease in here and then put the boot on, and then the e-brake mechanism is finished. So I have a new boot. I'll do the clip first. Okay, clips back on. The mechanism works. And what that's doing is inside this shaft that has the threads on it that screws onto the piston, as I engage the emergency brake, it pushes this forward. So when it pushes that forward, it pushes the piston forward. And when it pushes the piston forward, it's compressing the brake pads on the rotor. That's how this works. A little bit of grease in here. Okay, this is a boot that I got from SJ, and it's in their rebuild kit. And it's easier to install than the factory boots. Factory boots had a part that came out here, which made it almost impossible to get over here and slide on. So, but this one's super easy. So I'm just gonna get that through that hole, come on up. And then it's just a matter of stretching it and getting it into place. All right, there she is. E-brake system is rebuilt. Everything checked out. Inspection was good. It's functioning properly. Now we can go ahead and put the piston in. Oh, no, we can't. I haven't put the new seal in yet. So this is another seal that comes, basically you get the boot for the e-brake cable is separate. It doesn't come in the kit. So I bought that separate. In the kit, you get the seal that goes over the piston, you get a seal for the bleed, and you get the inner seal here for the piston. This one I want to put some brake fluid on. Okay, she's in there. Once that's in, it's a little harder to get the piston in and out. I also want to put brake fluid on the outside of the piston so I could get some lubrication. Alrighty, and now you're going to have to push a little bit to get it by that new rubber seal we just put in before it's going to engage with those threads. And it's not, and I just lubricated it, and you're going to do the same. So if you try it, it's not going to turn in because it's really slippery now. So this ought to do the trick. Again, it's a square shaft screwdriver. It just happens to be the right size for these pistons. So for right now, I'm going to screw it all the way in. All right, so Lotus says all the way in, and then you come back out. So this groove is parallel with the caliper housing in this direction. So what I want to do is just come back a little bit. Okay, so for now that's good. I've got my dot facing up toward the bleeder, and my groove is horizontal, parallel with this direction of the caliper. What should we do next? Oh, we got to get this sucker back on. Not fun. So to put it back on, I do it on the press. The hardest part is getting it started. You just have to be patient. Once you get it started, you can go ahead and just press it all the way off. I still have this retaining pin in there that does not want to come out, even though there's a spring behind it. It's just what happens. That's kind of a bummer. So I need to drill that out, clean that out, and all right, I was able to drill the dowel out. Here's what's left of that little dowel. Just barely, so it's about that big. Drilled that out. And in here, I still have the spring. I can see it. So I'm going to see if I can get that out. Okay. Here's the spring that came out. So theoretically, you put the dowel in, you compress the spring, you put the bracket on so it gets to the hole. It allows that dowel to pop forward, and that's supposed to hold it in place. But like I said before, I've never really had luck making that happen. But I've got it out, I've got the dowel out, so I'm going to assemble it, and then we'll worry about fastening it later. All right, so I just started this, and what I did to compensate for the need to spread these, which I find impossible, I took a little file and I just chamfered the edge, and I chamfered the edge there, not on the top, but on the bottom, and then it started its way in pretty easily. So now what I'm going to do is just press it all the way down until I line up the hole with the hole. And then I know it's in the right position. Let me see where we're at. Close, but not. So I'm looking through this hole, and I'm watching the hole on the caliper or the piston, the caliper piston casting. That's almost lined up. It's super close. I just need to go a little farther. I want to keep checking because I don't want to go too far. Still need to go a little ways. All right, perfect. Holes are lined up. This one right there. So we're done. This is back on. So let's go back over to the bench. So here's our mounting bracket. And here are two retaining clips and these little wedges that hold everything together. So we're going to reassemble this now. You notice these have a little, they can go two ways. They can go like that, or they can go like that. You want them like this, such that this section that comes down is facing toward the rest of the bracket.
So this section that curves downward, you want facing this way, all right, on both sides. So those are in. What we're going to do now is we're going to mount it back on the caliper. We'll slide that caliper in. So this is really loose, right? It goes between the bracket and the retaining clips. So you just slide it in like that. Super loose, it's going to bounce all over the place, but we're going to fix that in just a second. Now we go back to our two retaining little wedges, and you'll see on here there is a little section on the end that protrudes out. That's a stop, right? So what you want to do is slide these in from the back. First one goes in super easy. I'll slide that in. That little tab on that wedge is going to hit the bracket. So when you put your clip in, that clip will be in that location, lower like that. Now it's time for the last one. This one you're going to have to just use a little force to get it started, but not too bad. I just kind of wedge it in there. Now what I want to do is use my punch, a little hammer, just kind of get it going. All right, she's all the way in. And now you can see, it's hard to do with my caliper can move back and forth on that mounting bracket. That's what you want. That's what you want. So that's in there correctly. The only thing left to do are put your two little retaining pins in so that those wedges cannot slide out on you. These aren't the correct ones, but I'll put them in now just so we can say we did something. Now I know it's not going to come out, so I can slide that caliper forward and backwards. And as your brake pads wear, this thing is going to be able to reposition itself just fine. So that's kind of it. We've come to the end of the rebuild. It's kind of cool. Now we've got two calipers. Looking good, ready to go back on the car, and that's it. So these are the Bendix calipers, rebuild process from beginning to end. I've still got a couple things to do. I need to drill these and tap these so I can put a set screw in there to hold them. One on each side is fine. And put the boot on, put the bleeder valves on, hook the lines up, put the pads in. This one I have the anti-rattle clips in there. I haven't done that on this one yet. They're here somewhere. I don't know where they are, but they're around, so I'll find them and I'll put them on here, and then I can put the brake pads on, and that's it. So this is what they look like. I think these are stock colors. Aluminum, bare aluminum on this, zinc plated on this bracket. I think Lotus had these black. They may have zinc plated them. I'm not really sure. I don't recall, but I did them in black. I think it's a good look, close to stock. I like it. A lot better than they did look. So that's the rebuild process. We do these here at Westcam. If you like us, if you want to send us calipers to rebuild them, happy to do it for you. We can get them looking just as good as these. And typically it's like a 2-week turnaround time because we need to send, if you want zinc plating, we got to send these out to plate these. We don't do it in-house. So it's like a week and a half turnaround time on the plating and then a couple extra days to rebuild them. But that's it. And you can send us a message. Our web address is in the link below in the description of the video. So check that out. And if you want to send us calipers to rebuild, water pumps, something like that, shoot us a message, throw it in the mail. We'll get it done fast and we'll get it back to you. And they'll look good. All right. That is it for today. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it made sense. If you have questions, let me know. If you have comments, put them down below. Cool? All right. I'm out. See you next time.